Paris, my friends, has been blockaded by French farmers. The intention to put Paris under siege with their tractors has now happened. There are road blockades causing significant traffic disruptions and forcing motorists to use increasingly congested side roads. The farmers are dumping agricultural waste at government offices and even dumping manure inside of McDonald's. The French government is under heavy pressure, and the Prime Minister has now acknowledged the farmers' difficult position and had previously signaled that they would give consideration of additional measures against what has been called unfair practices. Now, this protest action is being termed Operation Paris Siege and has led to a crisis meeting between French President Emmanuel Macron and key cabinet ministers. The blockade has been organized by the Young Farmers Group and the FNSEA, which is France's largest farming union. They have established 8 choke points on major roads leading into the city and have warned of an indefinite siege of the capital. And as you can imagine, the blockade has caused significant disruption, with around 800 tractors surrounding Paris. As reported by The Guardian, they said that the Interior Minister said that 15,000 police and gendarmes have been mobilized to prevent the tractors from entering Paris and other cities where protests were happening and to keep access open to the airports and Rungus. He warned farmers that blocking Rungus, which supplies 60% of Paris's fresh food to about 12 million people, would be crossing a red line. The authorities were advising drivers to cancel or postpone all non-essential road travel. The president of the France Young Farmers told BFM TV that the aim is not to annoy the public, but to get answers from the government to come up with further measures. Stéphane Sanchez, the director of the Greater Paris Basin branch of the main farming union, said the blockades was being organized with almost military precision, with shifts of farmers deployed onto the barricades. As he put it, "We've thought of everything and have prepared meticulously. We are not leaving anything to chance in order to make a real long-term siege." He said that if there was no acceptable response from the government, they would also block major non-motorway roads. Now, one of the elements to the story that I find extremely interesting is that the French government appears to have been taken completely by surprise by the scale and intensity of the protests, which in of itself seems pretty surprising to me. After all, the anger bubbling up in France and around the EU has been gradually boiling over for a very long time. I think it's safe to say that governmental overreach with their green agenda coupled with the last 4 years of tyrannical abuse of citizens wielded by governments within the EU with their pandemic response has led to a breaking point for millions and millions of abused peoples all over that continent. Honestly, I'm surprised something like this hasn't happened sooner. Anyway, Agricultural Minister Marc Fesneau has stated that there will be new announcements addressing the protests within 48 hours and said, "We continue to work with their representatives. We are working with them to propose a certain number of measures that will show the willingness of the government to address the crisis." However, the farmers have vowed to continue their protests until their demands are fully addressed. So what precisely are the French farmers protesting in Paris demanding? Well, they are seeking better pay for their produce, less red tape and environmental regulations, which drives up their costs, as well as protection against cheap imports, negatively impacting their livelihoods. The farmers are also particularly concerned about the government's plans to reduce subsidies on agricultural diesel and the requirement to devote or convert 4% of their own farmland to non-productive areas where nature can thrive. Now, what this means is the government wants to strip away 4% of their farming land and turn it into nature preserves, because reasons. The farmers, though, are arguing that these regulations and environmental policies undermine their ability to compete, which of course it does. Every time the government tacks on more red tape and regulations, the cost just goes up and up. When you have imports from other countries that do not have that same red tape and regulations, well, their cost of goods are almost certainly going to be cheaper, which means that you as a business is going to be screwed. Now, the farmers are also calling for a simplification of certain technical procedures and an end to the progressive tax on agricultural diesel. The government of France, meanwhile, has tried to give some concessions to the farmers, but they were ultimately rejected as not going far enough. For example, As reported by U.S. News back on January 27th, President Emmanuel Macron's new Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, announced a series of measures Friday during a visit to a cattle farm in southern France. And he said that they included drastically simplifying certain technical procedures and the progressive end to diesel fuel taxes for farm vehicles. Attal also confirmed that France would remain opposed to the European Union signing a free trade deal with the Mercosur trade group, as French farmers denounce what they see as unfair competition from Latin American countries. Now, in response to Attal's announcement, France's two major farmers' unions quickly announced their decision to continue the protest, saying that the government's plan does not go far enough. The protest in France, my friends, isn't isolated to this country either. As we've reported here on this channel, farmers from other European Union nations are also joining in this fight against unbearable government overreach. You've got places like the Netherlands, Poland, Romania, and Germany who have all gotten into the fray. For example, in Germany on Monday, hundreds of German farmers used tractors to block ports, including Hamburg, one of the busiest European hubs for container shipping, in protest at plans by the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to scrap agricultural subsidies, among other things. The government there has partially compromised, but it's not enough to satisfy the angry farmers. Now, all in all, my friends, this appears to be the cost of going green. If you crush the farmers will almost certainly fight back. What remains to be seen is whether the French farmers will cause their governments to back down and cater to their changes. And naturally, of course, we'll be keeping an eye on this growing tension across Europe, and we'll report back as things develop. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. From the To Be Frank show, I am Adrian. I'll see you all next time.